Hello, YouTube. Otaka Mom here, and as you can guess, I am going to be covering the latest Child's Play film. This is the one directed by Lars Klevberg. It came out in theaters this weekend. It has Aubrey Plaza, Gabriel Bateman, Brian Tyree Henry. I got my notes on the side here to remind me. And this is a remake of a classic 80s slasher film called Child's Play, which featured a killer doll who was possessed by a serial killer who used voodoo to get himself into a doll. But in this version, they updated it. And what they did with this one is that instead of him being a killer doll is possessed by a serial killer who knew voodoo, he's actually a AI doll who is malfunctioning, and so because of that malfunction, he is going around killing people. So before I get into my review of what I thought of the film, I thought I would kind of start with my own history and feelings about slasher films. I'm just getting my notes out here. So my own history with slasher films. I am a child of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s. Slasher films were a big thing when I was a kid, and that's primarily the horror films that I kind of grew up around. And I say around because when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch these films, probably with good reason. So I wasn't allowed to watch slasher films as a kid, and but in later years, when I got to be an adult, was able to see R-rated films of my own, I started watching. I started catching up and watching a lot of these films, and so for my experience watching these films, I usually have a pretty good time watching, because by the time I got to be an adult, I got to the age where I could watch these films and look at them and and instead of really being like super scared by them, like I would have been when I was a kid, I was actually trying to find the strengths and trying to figure out how they did what they did, and trying to figure out how they did the tricks that they did. Now, obviously, in later years, I'll watch like behind the scenes things and whatnot to figure out how they did the effects, like using body doubles or using fake bodies to poke stuff through, or any other different types of ways that they did to create these effects. And so as a kid, I was one of those kids. Even though I had never seen these films, I'd participate in the discussions on the playground, and who would be the ultimate killer, Freddy or Jason, who would be who. So that resulted in the Freddy versus Jason movie, which we saw a few years ago. But also around that time, around 1988, another film called Child's Play came out, involving a killer doll. Now, that's a movie that was inspired by episodes of The Twilight Zone. There was another one called Trilogy of Terror that also had like a little voodoo doll that was that scared a woman in her apartment, and a bunch of other things and a bunch of other maybe other sources that played into it. So Child's Play became popular enough that it's still somewhat going strong. They're actually planning a TV series around Chucky, around the Child's Play. Chucky was the main villain in the Child's Play, if you're not sure who there was, and around this doll. And as a kid, when you see the commercials, the idea of a killer doll kind of scares you a little bit. True story, I had my own little Chucky moment as a kid. We were over at a relative's house, and one of my cousins had gotten this baby doll that talked, and the thing got annoying because it would just talk at random. just like really randomly. So we decided to take the batteries out, and the thing still kept talking. So it kind of freaked us out a little bit. so so yeah, so we've so the idea of a creepy doll is kind of scary. I mean, obviously now the premise is kind of silly, and by the time 3 came around, it was like they kind of ran out of steam a little bit with the premise. So when they went to number 4, which ended up being Bride of Chucky, they decided they were going to play around with it and be somewhat of a parody of the series. And so it results in some fourth wall breaks and whatnot, and kind of revitalized the series a little bit. And then Seed of Chucky came out, which I thought was somewhat entertaining, but other people didn't like it. And in some ways I could see why. But it wasn't as good. I mean, it was entertaining, but it wasn't as good as a Bride of Chucky. So a few years ago they started bringing it back again. They start out with Curse of Chucky, and Curse of Chucky was really good, and that went direct to DVD, and that was a really good film, because it went back to the form of Chucky is scary, and did a very good job of making him scary again. And the same thing with Cult of Chucky, which came out a couple years ago, I want to say, which put Chucky in an insane asylum and just gave him the plot point of now Chucky's able to put portions of his soul into other dolls, so that he has a whole army of Chuckies going. So that's what the original series is right now. Is that at the end of that one, it's been established that Chucky can now put portions of his soul into other dolls, and that he could create his own little army of Chuckies if he wanted to. So that's been established in the last film. So they're actually about to do a TV series around Chucky, and so that's where they are right now. That's still in development, so I don't know when that's going to be coming out. So in the meantime, MGM, who I think is owned by Orion, or Orion is owned by MGM, I don't know which, have decided they wanted to do their own Child's Play series based on the Chucky doll. And because of the fact that they own the rights to the first film, but they do not own the rights to the sequels, they wanted to start their own so that they could build sequels off of that. So this film is the first film in this potential line of sequels for that, so that they could build their sequels off of. So, in order for them to do that, because of the fact that the other series is still going strong, so in order for them to do that, they had to make some changes to the Chucky character and to the story. So what they ended up doing was that instead of being possessed by a voodoo serial killer, he's actually an AI. Is actually an AI doll who is able to run things like who is able to run devices like a kind of like an Alexa or a Siri. So you just tell it to give commands and it'll run the device. And so we're not getting into the review of the film. So in the course of the story, they aged up Andy. In the original first movie, Andy was like 7. In this one, he's 13. His mother's still a single mother, but she's younger. So they established early on that she was like 16 when she had him. So there's like overly weird on the age difference between the characters. the cop happens to live. The cop happens. His mother happens to live down the hall from them. So Mike, the cop, the detective, happens to live. His mother happens to live down the hall from them, so he's always there. So establishing that why he would be in the building at any particular time. So they did some things. They did some things with this story that were rather interesting. So one of them being that the origins of Chucky in this film. So the origin of Chucky in this film is that he is a buddy doll. So he's no longer a good guy doll like he was in the original Child's Play film. So fun fact, the good guy dolls in the original Child's Play were based off of the My Buddy dolls that were somewhat popular at the time. And with somebody thinking, like, this thing looks creepy, we're going to make a movie around it. So in this case, they actually have, he's a buddy doll. And he's an AI, so he's able to run devices in the house that are run by the Castle Corporation. And he's a malfunctioning doll. He's malfunctioning because a worker at the plant. Oh, I shouldn't say. I should state from this point. From this point out, we're probably going to start going into some more spoilers in my review on this. So, if you don't want spoilers, I'm warning you right now. I'm going to go into some spoilers with this film. So anyway, in this version of the film, his origin is that he's a malfunctioning doll because a disgruntled worker at the Vietnam plant where he's coming from decided to turn off all of his safeties. So the buddy dolls are not supposed to be able to swear. They're not supposed to be able to do any violent acts, or any other things. This worker decided to take all those safeties off of this particular doll, and then he kills himself. So this doll gets shipped to the U.S. He gets returned by one family because they thought his eyes were creepy. So so that's how he ends up in the hands of Andy and his mom. Is that she talks her boss into letting her take him home, and then she gives it to Andy as an early birthday present. And I like how they were able to get the doll into Andy's hands in this case, and why he would be interested in this doll, because like I said, they aged him up from 7 to 13. So a 13-year-old would not necessarily be interested in a doll like this. But the fact he's more like a sentient Alexa, it kind of plays in a little bit into his interest. He's not overly interested in it because the new model's coming out in a couple weeks. And she's like, give me a break. So he ends up playing with it. And of course, the doll imprints himself onto Andy, and so in the beginning, Andy and Chucky are actually friendly with each other. Chucky just wants to be Andy's friend, and he'll do anything for Andy. And of course, he knows that something is wrong. He knows that something is not right, but doesn't think anything of it at the time because of the fact that the doll is able to swear. And I mean, it's one of those things that's widely reported in these dolls. They're not supposed to be able to swear. So he doesn't think anything of it. And it isn't until it's not until the doll tries to choke his cat that he starts to try to train the doll not to do stuff like that. And so basically this doll will do anything to have Andy be his friend. And that's his motivations. He wants Andy to be his friend. And because he wants him to be his friend till the end. And basically his murder instincts get triggered after he sees Andy and his friends watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and he thinks, oh, that's what he wants. And so from that point on, that's when he starts becoming Mr. Murder Doll. Um, so anyway, so this is a movie that you kind of have to take it on its own merits. You can't really try to do it as a comparison between this film and the original 1988 film. It has to be taken on its own. It really seriously has to be taken on its own merits as a separate thing. Because really, that's the only way you're really going to enjoy this as a film. Because the movie does not take itself seriously at all. There are parts of the movie that are very funny, and and there are parts that are scary. There's some parts that play like a horror comedy, and there's some really good gags in it. Which I don't want to spoil the gags, but I thought the beginning was. I don't want to really spoil the gags, but there's some really good gags in it, and there's some parts of the film that can be scary, and some good jump scares in there. But there are parts of the film that can excuse me, that are somewhat scary. But there's some really good gags in it. There's some really good play with it. There are parts of the movie where you kind of feel a little sorry for Chucky. Because all he wants is to be friends with Andy, and because of that bad chip in his programming, he thinks the way to be friends with Andy is to do these awful things, and so you kind of feel bad for him at points in the story, because you want him to. It's almost like you want him to succeed, but you just wish he didn't do the bad things that he did. But speaking of Chucky, Mark Hamill, who does the voice of Chucky, does a really good job. Because this Chucky is not like the previous Chucky. Whereas because of the fact that the previous Chucky was a serial killer inside the body of a doll, is that he had a little bit more of a personality. He had a little bit more of a personality. He was able to put more of the one-liners in there. He was able to exude that he had a soul. And show that he had a personality, and show that he had what do you call it? That he had a personality, and that he also had a soul, and that he was a person, and that you believe the doll was a person inside a doll's body. However, Mark Hamill is presenting us with a very different Chucky in this case. He's presenting us a Chucky that, even when he's doing the most murderous things, even when he's doing the worst things possible, he's actually still very much an innocent, which makes it even creepier. And so throughout the movie, there are points where, in the movie, he'll ask Andy, "Are we having fun yet?" And in the beginning, it's very innocent, but then as he starts doing more murderous things, it starts being more of a killer, and he says it becomes creepier and creepier the more he says it. So Mark Hamill really did a really good job voicing Chucky in this case, because this Chucky is not like the previous Chucky. This Chucky is an innocent, basically. He is a Chucky who because he's not a serial killer, he wasn't born as a killer. He was programmed to be one, and he learned how to be one. But he still has an innocence about him, which makes it even creepier because he thinks he's playing. He doesn't realize that he's being a murderer. He thinks he's just playing, and he will do anything to make sure that nobody else can be Andy's friend, and because that's how he's been learning and programmed inadvertently. Then you have Andy, who in this film, he's a kid. He's got a hearing aid, so he's got a hearing aid, and so because that plays a little bit of his loneliness. So it makes it believable that he would rely on this doll to be his friend at some point. And so the actors, what's his name? We get the name out here. Gabriel Bateman, who plays Andy in this, he does a really good job because of the fact that he more or less, as far as the human characters, he carries a lot of this film. And he does a really good job of carrying this film. And for a kid actor, he does a really good job of doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this. And Aubrey Plaza does a good job, but they don't give her a whole lot to do in this film. Whereas in the what do you call it? In the original version, she probably had a little bit more to do, but in this version, she doesn't really have a whole lot. Same with Brian Tyree Henry, who plays Detective Mike in this film. He's not given a whole lot to do other than to find the carnage of Chucky to try to figure out what's going on. But it's not really, to me, that's not really their film. This is definitely a film between Andy and Chucky. It's about their friendship and how that goes wrong, and how the reliance on technology, and that message about the reliance on technology and how that can be detrimental. Okay, so yeah, the acting in this film, not only from those three actors, from like everybody in the film, was very good. For this type of film. But this is definitely Chucky's movie, and this is definitely Andy's movie. And like I said, Mark Hamill did an amazing job with this by giving us the creepiness of the characters and giving us the creepiness by being innocent. And so that played very well with this film. As far as the design of Chucky, I can forgive it a little bit, because he does look creepy. It does look a little creepy. Some were complaining about the fact that his mouth movements were very stiff, but I can forgive that because he's not supposed to be the serial killer. He's not supposed to be the serial killer with the doll with the soul of a serial killer in this one. He's supposed to be an AI, and if you've ever seen an AI, they have those stiff movements. So I can forgive. I can forgive that design, and I can forgive that choice of the choice of the mouth movements being stiff in this one. Now, if this movie makes enough this weekend and they decide to go with a sequel, they may improve on it. They may improve on that for the next one. Because the Buddy 2 is introduced in this film. So they may end up going with a Buddy 2 in the next one, who will be the serial killer doll. And we'll see what happens if this does. When I went last night, there wasn't that many people in the theater. It was a Thursday night. I don't know how it is everywhere else on a Thursday night for the movies. In New Hampshire, there's usually not a whole lot of people go on Thursday nights. So there wasn't that many people when I went. And this happens to be also the same weekend as Toy Story 4, so I don't expect it to be number one this weekend. But But I love the marketing campaign because you can see some of it flashing by here as we're talking. You gotta love this marketing campaign. So in a lot of the, if you notice that in some of the posters here, what we're seeing here is the more traditional poster that went with the movie. But if you look at a lot of the posters, because you see right there, you get the suggestions that Chucky kill off characters from Toy Story, because Toy Story is also opening this weekend. That's going to be the number one, I think. But yeah, this film, I don't think it's going to make number one. It's an enjoyable film. If you go, you'll have a good time with it. Don't think of it as like a remake or a reboot or whatever of Child's Play, because the original Child's Play series is still going on. They're making a TV series based on the original Child's Play. Think of this as its own thing. Think of this as another series along those lines. Think of it as Chucky in a parallel universe. And if you think it that way and you don't think about trying to compare it with the original Child's Play, you will have a good time on this one. Okay, so that is my review. Go see it. You'll go see it. You'll have a good time if you like slasher films. So yeah. So go see it. So okay. So that's my review of Child's Play, the new version, and I will see you next time. Bye.